Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating chapter from Morgan Housel's incredible book, The Psychology of Money. We're going to break down a concept that, honestly, trips up even the smartest people out there, the huge, and I mean huge, difference between getting wealthy and staying wealthy.
And this quote, man, it just gets right to the heart of it. You see, Housel's big idea is that while there are a million ways to get rich, there's really only one way to stay rich. It's a mix of being frugal and just a little bit paranoid. And as we're about to see, getting money and keeping it are two completely different games that require totally different mindsets.
So to really see this paradox in action, there's probably no better story than that of Jesse Livermore, who was, at one point, one of the greatest stock traders in history.
I mean, this guy was an absolute genius at getting wealthy. During the Great Crash of 1929, he shorted the market and made an absolute fortune. We're talking the equivalent of $3 billion today. Just incredible. But here's the kicker. His story is the perfect example of how the very same confidence that made him rich also pushed him to take bigger and bigger risks, until just a few years later, he lost it all.
Okay, so what is it? What's the real difference between these two skills? Why is it that someone can be a total rock star at making money, but a complete failure at keeping it?
This is what's so wild about it. The mindsets are basically polar opposites. Think about it. Getting wealthy, that's all about optimism, taking big swings, putting yourself out there. But staying wealthy, that's a whole different ballgame. It requires the total opposite. Humility, a healthy dose of fear, and really accepting that the money you've made can disappear just as fast as it came.
So if you think of getting money as your offense and keeping it as your defense, then what's the one skill that connects them both? Well, it's survival. Just staying in the game year after year without getting knocked out is what lets that magical force of compounding do its work.
All right, let's see how this plays out in the real world by comparing two investing legends. Now, we all know Warren Buffett, right? But you might not have heard of his partner from way back when, Rick Guerin, who was every bit as brilliant. Get this, $81.5 billion. That's roughly how much of Buffett's net worth came after he was old enough to collect Social Security. See, his real secret isn't just being a good investor, it's time. And the only way you get that time in the market is if you can survive.
He just survived. He didn't get carried away with debt. He didn't panic and sell his way through 14 different recessions. He didn't tie his whole identity to one single strategy or chase the latest hot trend. And, he didn't burn out and quit. He simply stayed in the game, letting his wealth compound decade after decade. That right there is the art of survival.
Okay, so that's Buffett. Now let's look at his partner, Rick Guerin. There's this great story about another investor asking Buffett whatever happened to Rick. And Buffett's answer was so simple. Rick was just as smart as us, but he was in a hurry.
And that right there, being in a hurry to get rich quick, that was his downfall. When the market took a nosedive in the 70s, Guerin was leveraged to the hilt with debt. He got margin called. He was forced to sell his stock to Buffett for pennies on the dollar. He was wiped out, gone. Buffett and Munger survived because they weren't in a hurry. Guerin did not.
Okay, so this is a great story, but what does it mean for us? How can we actually apply this survival mindset to our own lives? Well, Housel gives us a pretty simple three-part playbook.
All right, principle number 1. Your goal should be to become financially unbreakable. And what that really means is having a big enough buffer, cash, liquid savings, so you can ride out all the crazy ups and downs life throws at you without ever being forced to sell your long-term stuff at the worst possible moment. That buffer is your survival gear.
Okay, principle 2, and this one is so important. The most important part of every plan is to plan on the plan not going according to plan. The future is a beautiful, chaotic mess. No plan survives contact with reality. A really good plan knows this. It expects things to go wrong, and it builds in a margin for error to absorb those shocks.
And finally, principle 3. You need to become what Housel calls a paranoid optimist. I know, it sounds like a contradiction, right? But it's not. It means you're super optimistic that things will be better in the long run, but you're also paranoid enough to know that the journey to get there is going to be an absolute minefield.
And this is why that paranoid optimist mindset is everything. Just look at the history of the US over the last 170 years or so. The long-term trend? A 20-fold increase in the standard of living. That's the optimism part. You bet on that. But to actually get there, to capture those gains, you had to survive. And this is the paranoia part. 33 recessions, 9 major wars, 4 presidential assassinations, and more than a dozen massive market crashes.
You had to endure all that chaos to get the reward.
So, all of this brings us to the most important part of this explainer, turning these ideas back on ourselves. It's time to ask what game you're really playing with your money.
So I want you to think about this. Is your financial plan built to get wealthy, or is it built to stay wealthy? Is it all offense, all about those massive gains and taking big risks? Or is it built for defense, for endurance, for making sure you're still standing no matter what happens?
And the next question is a gut check. Is your plan strong enough to survive reality? Because things like losing a job, or a market crash, or a medical emergency, those aren't what-ifs, they're whens. They are inevitable parts of life. Can your plan handle that?
And that leads us to the final and maybe the most crucial question of all. This is really the whole point of Housel's chapter. It boils down to this. What is your margin for error? How much room do you have before a bad month becomes a catastrophe? Before surprise becomes a total disaster? Really thinking about that question, that might just be the most important thing you ever do for your financial future.